It is our praying and affliction evening or night, and it's really going to be an evening to hear stories from our Black members in our church, to hear a brief message from the Bible, to pray together through Psalms. And our goal is understanding. Our goal is compassion, empathy, and unity as we just really come together praying to our God in the state of our world. It's fallen and it's dark and we live in it. And so because of that, many men and women in the Bible times and even today, their prayers are prayers of affliction. And so tonight, let's begin with the word of prayer, and we'll give you a presentation of our praying and affliction tonight. Let's bow our heads in prayer. God in heaven, the God who sees all, the God who knows all, we just come together tonight just as a family, as friends, praying to you of the pain of our Black brothers and sisters, not just in our church, but throughout the world, throughout the entire world, the affliction. And it's been so painful to watch and heart-wrenching, God. And we just call upon you tonight to bring healing, but also to bring unity and to bring conversations forward, to bring the talking of one another and hearing and listening and really giving our empathy and our hearts to our Black community. God, we love you, and be with us tonight as we just peel back the curtain and just look at the affliction that is before us. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. As I said earlier, we are praying tonight. We are seeking God. We are looking toward each other. We are looking toward our God. And as the Bible says in Corinthians, 1 Corinthians 12, but God has put this body together, this church together, these people together, giving greater honor to the parts that lacked it, so that there should be no division in the body, and that its parts should have equal concern for each other. If one part suffers, every part suffers with it. If one part is honored, every part rejoices with it. Now you are the body of Christ, and each one of you is a part of it. 1 Corinthians chapter 12, verses 24 to 27. I'm going to be showing you a video here, just looking at the concept of justice, looking at that through a biblical lens. And we want to thank the Bible Project for providing some great content for us to grapple and really open our eyes to justice. Here we go.
If you were a praying mantis, it would be socially acceptable to devour your mate.
And if you're a honey badger, you have no regard for other animals. You don't care.
If you're a panda with twins, it's normal to abandon one to take care of the other.
But if humans do any of these things, we would call it wrong, unfair, or unjust.
Yeah, why is that? Why do humans care so much about justice?
Well, the Bible has a fascinating response to that question. On page 1, humans are set apart from all other creatures as the image of God.
Yeah, God's representatives who rule the world by his definition of good and evil.
And this identity, it's the bedrock of the Bible's view of justice. All humans are equal before God and have the right to be treated with dignity and fairness no matter who you are.
And that would be nice if we all did that. But we know how the world really works.
And the Bible addresses that too. It shows how we are constantly redefining good and evil to our own advantage at the expense of others.
Yeah, self-preservation. And the weaker someone is, the easier it is to take advantage of them.
And so in the biblical story, we see this happening on a personal level, but also in families, and then in communities, and in whole civilizations that create injustice, especially towards the vulnerable. But the story doesn't end there. Out of this whole mess, God chose a man named Abraham to start a new kind of family. Specifically, Abraham was to teach his family to keep the way of the Lord by doing righteousness and justice.
Yeah, doing righteousness, that's a Bible word I don't really use, but what comes to mind is being a good person.
But what does that even mean, being good? The biblical Hebrew word for righteousness is tzedakah, and it's more specific. It's an ethical standard that refers to right relationships between people. It's about treating others as the image of God,
With the God-given dignity they deserve.
and this word justice, it's the Hebrew word mishpat. It can refer to retributive justice.
Like if I steal something, I pay the consequences.
Exactly. Yet most often in the Bible, mishpat refers to restorative justice. It means going a step further, actually seeking out vulnerable people who are being taken advantage of and helping them.
Yeah, some people call this charity.
But mishpat involves way more. It means taking steps to advocate for the vulnerable and changing social structures to prevent injustice.
So justice and righteousness are about a radical, selfless way of life.
Yeah, and you find this idea all over the Bible. Like here, in the book of Proverbs, what does it mean to bring about just righteousness?
Open your mouth for those who can't speak for themselves.
And what do these words mean for the prophets, like Jeremiah?
Rescue the disadvantaged, and don't tolerate oppression or violence against the immigrant, the orphan, and the widow.
And like here, look in the book of Psalms.
The Lord God upholds justice for the oppressed, gives food to the hungry, and sets the prisoner free. But he thwarts the way of the wicked. Whoa, he thwarts the wicked?
Yeah, in Hebrew, the word wicked is rasha. It means guilty or in the wrong. It refers to someone who mistreats another human, ignoring their dignity as an image of God.
So justice and righteousness is a big deal to God.
Yes, it's what Abraham's family, the Israelites, were to be all about. They ended up as immigrant slaves being oppressed unjustly in Egypt. And so God confronted Egypt's evil, declaring them to be rasha, guilty of injustice. And so he rescued Israel. But the tragic irony of the Old Testament story is that these redeemed people went on to commit the same acts of injustice against the vulnerable. And so God sent prophets who declared Israel guilty.
But they weren't the only ones. There's injustice everywhere.
Yeah, some people actively perpetrate injustice. Others receive benefits or privileges from unjust social structures they take for granted. And sadly, history has shown that when the oppressed gain power, they often become oppressors themselves.
So we all participate in injustice, actively or passively, even unintentionally. We're all the guilty ones.
And so this is the surprising message of the biblical story. God's response to humanity's legacy of injustice is to give us a gift, the life of Jesus. He did righteousness and justice, and yet he died on behalf of the guilty. But then God declared Jesus to be the righteous one when he rose from the dead. And so now Jesus offers his life to the guilty so that they too can be declared righteous before God, not because of anything they've done, but because of what Jesus did for them.
The earliest followers of Jesus experienced this righteousness from God, not just as a new status, but as a power that changed their lives and compelled them to act in surprising new ways.
Yeah, if God declared someone righteous when they didn't deserve it, the only reasonable response is to go and seek righteousness and justice for others.
This is a radical way of life, and it's not always convenient or easy. It's courageously making other people's problems my problems.
This is what Jesus meant by loving your neighbor as yourself. It's about a lifetime commitment fueled by the words of the ancient prophet Micah. God has told you, humans, what is good and what the Lord requires of you is to do justice, to love mercy, and to walk humbly with your God.
That was a really great video just to give us a concept of justice from God's perspective, but also even that, it's just a powerful explanation of it and how we should be justice warriors as well. Also, we wanted to hear from disciples in our own church, Black members of our church, and we asked a few of them if they'd be willing to share some of their stories of their experience living as a Black man or a Black woman in our communities, in our country. And so we wanted to show you a video, and they were so gracious to share their stories. So we're so thankful for them. So we have a few videos, and in between we're going to stop and pause. So here's our first brother sharing our sister sharing her story.
Hey, this is gonna seem really raw, but I'm gonna try and just be as transparent as possible. So, I had to think really long and hard about this project, or this request rather, to share a story where I've experienced racial injustice. And I was like, whew, man, which one? It could have been the time when I was tasked with going by public transit, meaning like the bus. I don't know if it was RTD back then, if you guys remember that, from Los Angeles Public Bus Lines, or MTA as it's known now. But I was a teenager, I was about 14 or 15, and I was taking my little sister and my little cousin. They were both about, I want to say like 7 years old. And we were leaving San Fernando Valley, Panama City, to go to my grandma's house, and she lived in South Central LA. So it's usually like, I want to say at that time it was somewhere between a 2 and a 4 hour bus ride, switching buses and things of that nature. But our very first stop, leaving the valley, there was a man who just, complete and random stranger, just started shouting obscenities at us. And I had to draw my sister and my cousin Steven close to me, and I was trying to cover their ears, and they were visibly very scared. And started shouting the N-word and things like, go back to where you came from. Like, I have no idea who this man was. Our mere existence made him agitated, angry. He was like in a fit of rage as we were just trying to cross the street. And my sister and my cousin, they were like, well, what's wrong with this man? Why is he angry at us? I was like, he doesn't even know why he's angry at us. And we just continued to cross the street. Or the time that when I was in grade school and children would tease me about my dark skin, called me burnt biscuit, say that I was left in my mom's oven too long. Or by the time I got to high school, I was called white girl and Oreo because I guess spoke proper. I had good grades or whatever. And that came from both my own community and others around me. Or when most recently, I think, I won't say most recently, but one of the most recent times that has really stuck with me, when I was hired for this amazing job where I got to work in Manhattan. Over the summer, I would work in Manhattan across the street from like Radio City Music Hall during the week, and then they would fly me back to St. Louis, where we were living at the time, on the weekends for this huge commercial real estate firm. And I just thought, this is my time to shine. This is great. I was offered permanent employment with this company. At the time I was a contractor. I was helping move the offices from Manhattan, the headquarters from Manhattan to St. Louis. And I've been working there from July up through October. I got offered an even better position where I would have to travel to India to train employees there, and back office accounting and finance operations, only to receive a phone call from the temp agency where I was contracted through, and I was told I wasn't welcome back there anymore, like the next day, and I had to go and turn in my badge and everything else. And the issue was that they said I had an attendance problem, and I said, well, that's highly unlikely. I work extra hours. They just offered me this great position. I came highly recommended by my own direct manager to another senior member who offered me the job. And now you're suddenly telling me this? I don't understand. And then I was told I was never allowed to contact anyone from the real estate firm again. Like I was barred. And I had to tell my story through the temp agency. And I thought, so I started shooting off and blasting emails, and as far as like proof that there's no attendance problem, like all of the communications I had for any time off that I requested where it was approved or things of that nature, let alone I just got offered a permanent job and now it was rescinded and I was no longer welcome back. So I sat and I thought really long and hard about this. I sobbed, I cried, I didn't understand. Then I remembered there was one other black woman who worked as a contractor at that firm. We did not work in the same capacity. She was a lower level employee. She was about a foot shorter than I, middle age, lighter complexion, but we both had red dreadlocks. The only black women. And she had a later starting shift. Oftentimes, I was in the office before most of my coworkers around 7:30, and I would leave between 4 and 5 p.m., sometimes 6 p.m. And this woman, she would come later, like around 9 a.m. and leave later. So what was specifically said to me was that I had a habit of coming in late and leaving early. And I thought to myself, well, that's really odd considering I'm usually there before anybody else even shows up to the office, like no one in the office. And then when I asked for more information, the representative from the temp agency, she said, well, they said, it was a woman with your hairstyle that would come in, around a certain time, and then they'd see you leave early. And I'm like, there has to be a mistake. They're obviously thinking this other woman, Davidra was her name, and I are the same person. Can you just talk to them? And at the time, I really, really wanted this job. I was devastated. I felt like a failure, and it's something I still carry with me. I fear that happening every single day, because I'm not seen as a person. I'm seen just as that black girl in a lot of spaces that I'm in. The next job I held after that, not even a month after being fired from there, I was routinely mistaken for the receptionist at a large corporate bank. And I started to notice that there weren't really any other black, let alone black people, but black women working in the same capacity or higher as me. They were usually like the document processors or the receptionists or whatever. And that's not any shade or anything to those jobs. But then consistently, anytime there was a mixer or a meeting or whatever, people that would look me in the face every single day and call me some other woman's name. She and I became friends. We are still friends. We text each other and call each other. And she's back in St. Louis. But, I feel like I have to work 8 times as hard to make sure that that does not happen again. My current manager, who's been amazing, you know, anytime I feel uncertainty about my work product or anything of that nature, she's like, I don't know why you're always so worried. And I was like, I just want to make sure that, you know, I'm performing, you know, at expectation or better. You know, I haven't gone out to, you know, on a limb to say, I'm afraid of losing my job, you know, for some irrational fear. But when I even think of the word, it's an irrational fear, or the phrase irrational fear, I'm like, is it really irrational? Because that's been my life. I've been mistaken for, I don't know, however many other people in my life that I look nothing like. I've had people post on my social media accounts that I look like this really unattractive object. Like someone literally posted a photo of like an ape monkey thing. It was like, hey, this reminded me of you, ha ha. And that was funny. And I'm like, wow, that's really hurtful. And in those times, all this time, I just normally shrug it off and I keep walking. And I keep living my day, my life, because I'm like, those people, they don't know any better. And given, I guess, the most recent events and people stepping up saying, oh, I had no idea, I didn't know it was like this for Black people and whatever, I'm just like, did you really not know? Or did you choose to just bury your head? Or did you say things like, oh, slavery was 400 years ago, get over it? Or why are you still upset about why are you playing the race card? There is no more racism. And these are all just thoughts that I've had during all of this, I guess, unrest is what they're calling it. And now, I mean, I'm glad for the additional allyship that's coming out of the woodwork, but I'm also a little bit frustrated, not a little bit, I'm very frustrated that it's taken so many atrocities and so long for people to just understand what it's like to live in this skin. And those are my thoughts, and that's my story.
Wanted to give a special thanks to Teresa Jones, just her bravery, just to share that story with all of us. In Psalm 9, this is one of the prayers of affliction that we read about, and we're going to read it together. And what I want us to do tonight is just to close your eyes, because we're going to say a prayer, but we're going to pray through the psalm. We're not reading, I don't want us to look at it as we're reading the Bible. I want us to pray along with the psalmist here as he cries out to God. Let's bow our heads in prayer. The Lord reigns forever. He has established his throne for judgment. He rules the world in righteousness and judges the people with equity. The Lord is a refuge for the oppressed, a stronghold in times of trouble. Those who know your name trust in you, for you, Lord, have never forsaken those who seek you. Sing the praises of the Lord enthroned in Zion. Proclaim among the nations what he has done. For he who avenges blood remembers. He does not ignore the cries of the afflicted. Lord, see how my enemies persecute me. Have mercy and lift me up from the gates of death, that I may declare your praises in the gates of daughter Zion, and there rejoice in your salvation. The nations have fallen in the pit they have dug. Their feet are caught in the net they have hidden. The Lord is known by his acts of justice. The wicked are ensnared by the work of their hands. The wicked go down to the realm of the dead, all the nations that forget God. But God will never forget the needy. The hope of the afflicted will never perish. You know, it's easy for us sometimes to look at the rioting and look at the smoke that's filling the cities. And I just wanted to say something to that, because there's a lot of anger but we know that anger is a secondary emotion. Anger primarily comes from three things. It comes from being hurt. It comes from fear, and it comes from powerlessness. And so as we look at that psalm, we direct our eyes above, but we also want to understand that the anger that's in our communities, and especially in the Black communities, the anger is there's been generations of hurt, generations of fear, and generations of powerlessness. We're going to hear from another member of our church, and we're going to hear his testimony, and that is Mo Jones.
It's been many. It's been racially profiled. I've been through a lot of things. I think I just kind of shove it down and just think of it as part of life at this point. I think that one of the worst experiences was I was a teenager, young adult, and some people I knew from childhood got robbed, and they said it was by a black guy, and they asked which black guy you knew. I guess, I don't know, but then they came to my house middle of the night, drugged me out, gun to my head from my mother, all these things, never said what I did, and took to the station, kept there, just really terrible, bad experience. Just threatened, and I was young, and luckily, which is not lucky, I had other bad experiences in my life to the point of where I knew they would lie to get you to say whatever they want you to say, all these things. It was like, just say you did it. If you said you did it, then we'll let you go home, or then it was, all right, we'll shoot it straight. You say you did it, we'll make sure the judge takes it easy on you. I know I didn't do anything because I had been at home, and outside of home, I was with my cousin. But nonetheless, spent about a night or so in jail. It was cold. Luckily, a good friend of mine, my godfather, he's well known in the city, and he was, made some calls and came down to get me. But after that, I got pulled over probably constantly, and it was, you fit the description of this person, you fit the description of this person. And I think that's the worst thing for me, where people see me just as a person, or any other person of color, as a set of clothes, or I'll use a silly example at work, and it's not just here, it's been many places, but I encounter a lot where I wear scrubs, nobody knows who I am, didn't recognize you have on scrubs. I remember once, even in my job, one of the nurses actually was picking up the phone to call security because it came in on the weekend. I didn't have on a suit and tie, and I had on, a hoodie and some shorts. And I came into the nurse's station, and everybody just paused like, oh my God, who is this? One girl knew who I was. That, but another girl was, almost confronting me, giving me a hard time, and then another girl was,
I wanted to thank Mo Jones just for his heart to share and just the willingness to be vulnerable about the experiences that he has. Not just them, but there's more there. There's more stories. that he has, but he just was gracious enough just to share that story with us. And that leads us into our affliction night of Psalm 102. And this is a prayer. What I want you to do is I want you to close your eyes because we're going to pray through this psalm together. Let's bow our heads. Hear my prayer, Lord. Let my cry for help come to you. Do not hide your face from me when I am in distress. Turn your ear to me when I call. Answer me quickly. For my days vanish like smoke, and my bones burn like glowing embers. My heart is blighted and withered like grass. I forget to eat my food. In my distress, I groan aloud and am reduced to skin and bones. I'm like a desert owl, like an owl among the ruins. I lie awake. I've become like a bird alone on a roof. All day long, my enemies taunt me. Those who rail against me use my name as a curse. For I eat ashes as my food and mingle my drink with tears. Because of your great wrath, for you have taken me up and thrown me aside. My days are like the evening shadow, and I wither away like grass. Amen. Verse 12. But you, Lord, sit enthroned forever. Your renown endures throughout all generations. You will arise and have compassion on Zion, for it is time to show favor to her. The appointed time has come, for her stones are dear to your servants. Her very dust moves them to pity. The nations will fear the name of the Lord. All the kings of the earth will revere your glory. For the Lord will rebuild Zion and appear in his glory. He will respond to the prayer of the destitute. He will not despise their plea. That was Psalm 102, the prayer of affliction. And you can always go back and read through these Psalms of the psalmist David talking with God during his time of pain and suffering. I'm going to go and introduce our next testimony, and that is from Janelle Arco. She just arrived to Shoreline last month, and she has a story to tell.
So people keep asking me how I'm doing, and it's a really difficult question to answer because though I know on one hand that everything that's happening in the media, everything that's happening right now with protests and just the noise that's going on surrounding the Black Lives Matter movement and the fight against police brutality is just now making people aware of the problems of racism that have been happening in this country. And so I'm grateful on one hand that people are starting to see it for the first time and starting to understand it more because things are being recorded and shared. But in my heart, it's hard because the effects of this issue and this problem in our country have affected me my whole life, and the pain is very real to me. It's something I've lived with my whole life, and so when people just asking me now, it's hard. Though I am grateful that at least people are asking. And so it's triggered a lot of things for me. I think about times in my life where I felt this hatred. I've experienced that hurt. Even my first week of kindergarten, I think that was the earliest memory I can think back to of really dealing with race and having that in my face. First week of kindergarten, I was super excited and because I loved school. I've always loved school. And I remember I was playing on the blacktop and was playing with some girls, and one of the girls comes to me and she's like, "We can't play with you. You're black and you're bad." Now, mind you, this is a girl I've never met, didn't know her. I mean, it's the first week of kindergarten. And I remember just feeling so confused by what she said because I didn't understand. I didn't really understand where that was coming from, especially since I knew I wasn't bad. I knew I hadn't done anything to her. But that's what she thought of me because of the color of my skin. That's what she had been taught by her family, by the media, by the culture of this country that is constantly rejecting people that have skin like me. I think about, even in the church, I grew up as a Kingdom kid, and I remember being at a park service with my best friend, and we were watching some of the little kids, because I've always loved kids, and watching some of the disciples' kids. And I remember I was playing with one of their toys, and the little boy snatches a toy from me, and he's like so angry. And he was like, "No, your hands are dirty. You can't play with this." And, you know, I was like a preteen going on a teenager, and I knew what he meant. I knew my hands were clean, but I knew in his mind he saw dirty, he saw bad. And it hurts because, you know, these are things that I've lived with. This is the way I function in the world. These types of thinking about me have been constant, and it's painful. It's hard because I've constantly, daily, have to live in the reality that people don't see me as a human, don't see me as a person, have not seen me as worthy. In my entire life, every day of my life, I've had to fight to not only believe that within myself, but to teach others that I am worthy, to show others that I'm enough. And it's tiring, it's exhausting. And I'm grateful that I'm able to share that truth with others so that they know, that they understand. Because it's not easy. I'm grateful that there's conversations now, even within disciples, because some of that pain and hatred and all that has come from even within the church. And I think what I want people to understand is it's not just about police brutality. That's a small drop in the bucket of a much larger issue of racism and systems of oppression and ideology of hatred. And that has really diseased our country and has really been in the minds and hearts of people since, I don't know how long, but it's definitely been since the beginning of this country. And yes, that's within the world, but that's also amongst disciples. And it's hard because it's not just about police brutality. And you know, I hear people saying, can't we just get over it? You know, racism, slavery is over. Can't we just stop talking about this? Can we just start talking about Jesus? And I think about that. I think about Jesus. I think about how he walked and that he loved those who were hated, who were oppressed, who were forgotten, that he stood up for those people that people didn't even regard as human. And isn't that our call as disciples, to stand up for that love, to stand up for that unity, to stand up against that sin? And that's rampant in our country. And so that's my hope, is that we can do that we can be that example of love and light, and start listening and start paying attention and start thinking about our own ideas of race and of people, and really see if we're really loving like Jesus is. And so thank you for listening to my story.
I wanted to thank Janelle. Just thank you so much. And thank Mo and Teresa just for their bravery, their courage to share these painful stories, just to sit back for a moment and just let your heart process what you're hearing. From being young to being adult, it's still the same pain they feel. And I'm just so proud to be their brother in Christ. I'm so proud to be their friend. And this is the prayer in affliction. This is what we want to get to. In John 17, Jesus has this prayer before he's going to die and go on the cross. And Jesus knows there's racism because he was already in Samaria. He was already at the well with the woman. He was already with people that were called half-breeds, not Jewish enough. And Jesus spent time there because those were his people. He says, my prayer is not for them alone. He's talking to God. I pray also for those who will believe in me through their message, that all of them may be one, Father, just as you and me are one, and I'm in you and you are in me. May they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you sent me. I have given them the glory that you gave me, that they may be one as we are one. I and them and you and me, so that they may be brought to complete unity. And the world will know that you sent me and have loved them even as you have loved me. Father, I want those who you've given me to be with me where I am. To see my glory, the glory you've given me because you've loved me before the creation of the world. Righteous Father, though the world does not know you, I know you. And they know that you have sent me. I've made you known to them and will continue to make you known, in order that the love you have for me may be in them, and that I myself may be in them. You know, there's a call for unity that Jesus wants us to have, but also the empathy and the compassion and the willingness to lean into the conversation. To not be like, let's get this over with. When's this all going to end? No. This is why Jesus went to the well. This is why he went to Samaria, to engage in the conversation. When everyone thought they were half-breeds and the Jews were filled with racism toward them, Jesus leaned in. So it begs the question, how can we help? What can we do? So I wanted to show you another video that I found that was I think it'll be very helpful for all of us. It's called having the uncomfortable conversation with a black man.
Welcome to the first of hopefully many episodes of Uncomfortable Conversations with the Black Man. In the midst of all this chaos in our world, so many of y'all have reached out to me, and by y'all, I mean white people. Have reached out to me asking, how can I help? How can I join in? How can I stand with you? So I've created this for you. Because in order to stand with us and people that look like me, you have to be educated on issues that pertain to me, and fully educated so that you can feel the full level of pain, so that you can have full understanding. I fervently believe that if the white person is your problem, only the white person can be your solution. And so this is made for you, my white brothers and sisters, to increase your level of understanding so that you can increase your level of compassion and lead ultimately to change. So consider this a safe space to answer so many questions that I've seen from y'all. The first question I've seen a lot of, Emmanuel, why are y'all rioting? I understand protesting, but why riot? And to that I submit this. MLK said that rioting is the language of the unheard. For years, black people have tried peacefully protesting, going back to 1965 and before with the Selma March, and that didn't work. And then in 2016, Colin Kaepernick, he took a knee, and that agenda got moved to a flag, which was never the goal. He just wanted to raise awareness on social injustice. So that didn't work. And so now we've seen riots because black people and hurt people are trying to get the attention of the oppressor. They're trying to raise awareness of the oppression. I was biking around Lake Austin the other day, and there was a white girl about 15 meters ahead of me. And as I'm on my bike, I say to her, on your left, because I want to notify her I'm coming so that she can change her course of action. I get 10 meters away and I increase my voice, on your left, because she had yet to move. I get 5 meters away and she's still there, and I say, on your left, because I realize if she doesn't change her course of action, there will be a collision. And as I approach her, I yell, on your left, and we collide. My goal was never to hit her, but because she had her headphones in, she didn't hear me, and so she didn't change her course of action. I believe that that's the same thing black people are doing now. 1960s were yelling, "We're oppressed." But the course of action wasn't changed. And so we again yell, "We're oppressed," but the course of action wasn't changed. And so again we yell, "We're oppressed." And now you see the collision that's occurred in America. So while I don't condone rioting, and I'm sure you don't either, because for the most part, black people and others that are looting and rioting destructively, they're burning down their own homes. But when you think about the 5 different stages of grief, you come up to one stage, which is called anger. And sometimes emotions, they don't know their actions. I remember my mom, when I was a child, she lost her sister, and I just remember her yelling and screaming. And I come outside my room and I see my mom throwing herself into a wall, and I'm wondering what happened. And my dad tells me that my mom's sister had died. Thinking back on that, throwing yourself into a wall, it's not going to change anything. You're actually harming yourself. But sometimes pain and hurt, it doesn't know how to express itself. You know, another question I get from my white friends, they ask me, why do you think white privilege exists? And I say this, if you and I were in a race, and the official at the start line, they held me back for the first 200 meters, and you had a 200-meter then head start, the only way to level out that race is to either stop you from running or put me on a golf cart and catch you up and catch myself up. Well, you see, what we've done in America is we've simply said, okay, Emmanuel, you're now free to run. And we've acted as if it's a fair race, when in all honesty, black people were held back for hundreds of years. And so if in the late 1960s we say, okay, black people, you can go now, that's not a fair race. LBJ, he said it best when he said, you can't shackle and chain someone for hundreds of years, liberate them to freely compete with the rest, and still justly believe that you've been fair. So white privilege is, it's having a head start due to hundreds and hundreds of years of systematic and systemic racism. It's having a head start intrinsically built into your life. It's not saying your life hasn't been hard, but what it's saying is your skin color hasn't contributed to the difficulty in your life. I live in an affluent neighborhood in Austin, Texas, and if I ever go to my mailbox and I see a white woman walking up to the mailbox, I consciously sit in my car because I don't want her to feel like I'm a threat. If I'm on an elevator with a white person, I try to hit the button first and get off the elevator first because I don't want them to perceive me as a threat, because I realize at any point in time, whiteness can be weaponized. We saw that this past week. Amy Cooper, Central Park, the woman who called the cops on a black man who wanted her to leash her dog because it was illegal to walk your dog without a leash. And she used 2 words that are a death sentence for black people. When she called the cops, she said, "There's a black man who's threatening my life." Both of those things, as far as when you compile them together, were a lie, because that black man, he was a bird watcher. And while so many people saw that incident and they were heartbroken, I, as a black man, saw that incident and was reminded of 1955. Emmett Till, 14-year-old boy who was lynched, mutilated, and killed by 2 white men because a white woman made a false claim saying that he flirted with her. In 2017, that white woman recanted that story. In 1956, the 2 white men that killed him, they got off. And they admitted that they did it because they knew they couldn't be charged again due to double jeopardy. That, to me, is white privilege. The ability to weaponize your whiteness and the ability to live life unconsciously. Because I, as a black man, have to calculate every move I make the second I walk outside my house. Another question I get that I'm sure several of y'all have thought, if not your kids have, how come black people can say the N-word, but we can't? I had to do some research on that to educate myself a little bit further. The N-word is synonymous with oppression, execution, and subordination. Black people were so long treated and viewed as no more than the slave to a master. We were viewed as dirt, and that word is synonymous with that. So there's a visceral reaction whenever we hear that word coming out of someone whose complexion is white that reminds us of the pain of our ancestors. Black people took something that was meant and originally used as evil, and we turned it into a term of endearment. So white people, I submit that you can't, shouldn't, and nor should you ever have a desire to say that word, whether quoting a rap song, a movie, or anything. Because remember, that word is truly synonymous with hatred. The abolitionist Frederick Douglass, he wrote when talking about his master that reading and learning would spoil an N-word. Because remember, black people were nothing more than a slave to their master. And when you think about, well, then why are black people saying it? And if I can't say it, then you shouldn't either, black person. We've been oppressed for so long, our rights have for so long been limited, that for you to now try to again limit our speech, it's painful. So that's why, in a nutshell, in a few minutes and seconds, why you can't say the N-word. And another question I've gotten so often: how come black people care more about white on black crime than black on black crime? It's not that we don't care about black on black crime, but let me propose this. When a black person commits a crime, they go to jail. When a white person commits a crime, they get off. And hopefully, they even get arrested. Ahmaud Arbery, the black man that was chased and gunned down by 2 white men in Georgia, it took us 2 months to arrest those perpetrators. And the only reason we did? Because we saw the video. Imagine if camera phones didn't exist. Black on black crime is an issue, but if you do the research, high violent crimes are all interracial. Blacks kill blacks, whites kill whites, Hispanics kill Hispanics. So it's not that we don't care, but it's the same issue as why y'all saying Black Lives Matter when all lives matter. We understand all lives matter, but right now, black people are dying at the hands of white people, and I can't change that. Only you, my white friends, y'all can change that. So if you want to know, how can you help? How can you stand with us? How can you stand with me? You must first educate yourself so you know exactly what you're standing for and why you're standing. Because the only way we can solve this issue is through exposure, through education, through compassion, and through empathy. Thank you all for tuning in to the first of hopefully many episodes of Uncomfortable Conversations with Black Men. Consider this a safe space to educate yourself and help me help you by leaving your questions and sharing this video. Because while you might think you're not ignorant, someone you know and someone you love, they may be.
I really enjoyed that video very much, and I'm really glad that I was able to show it to all of us. And if you want to look that up later, it's on YouTube. If you forgot the title, it's Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man. I can go ahead and send you a link. He's got a number of episodes. I wanted to turn our attention to a passage in the Bible that can emotionally relate. Hopefully it connects you to the Black community, to our Black brothers and sisters a little bit. There was a man that was an invalid, and it's in John chapter 5, and I'm going to read this verse 1 through 5, and I'm going to make a few comments about this passage and how it connects and relates. Sometime later, Jesus went up to Jerusalem for one of the Jewish festivals. Now there is in Jerusalem near the sheep gate a pool, which in Aramaic is called Bethesda, and which is surrounded by 5 covered colonnades. Here a great number of disabled people used to lie, the blind, the lame, the paralyzed. One was there that had been an invalid for 38 years. I want you to close your eyes just for a moment with me. And I want you to imagine being confined to a bed for 38 years. Imagine how weak physically his body became. I want you to imagine how weak his spirit was. I want you now to imagine waiting by the pool day after day after day for years and years, but no one to help you get to the water so it can be stirred. I want you to imagine the feelings of hopelessness, frustration, pain, hurt, loneliness. Imagine the feeling of being restless, overwhelmed, disappointed, depressed, miserable, empty. The feeling of insignificance, humiliated, worthless. And Jesus in verse 6, he asked this man, When Jesus saw him lying there, you can open your eyes and look on the passage, and learn that he had been in this condition for a long time, he asked him, "Do you want to get well?" "Sir," the invalid replied, "I have no one to help me into the pool when the water stirred. While I'm trying to get in, someone else goes down ahead of me." Then Jesus said to him, "Get up, pick up your mat and walk." And at once the man was cured. He picked up his mat and walked. The day on which this took place was a Sabbath. This is the only story in the Gospels where Jesus heals, not because the person requested it. He heals not because the friend of the person requested it, not because this paralytic expressed some sort of faith. Jesus met him where he was at. And now I want you to imagine for a moment, close your eyes for a moment, imagine with me how the Black community has been confined in racism, not only their entire lives, but for generations. The feelings of hopelessness, the feeling of frustration, anger, pain, loneliness, restless, overwhelmed, disappointed, miserable, empty, insignificant, humiliated, and worthless. I'd like you to open your eyes now. And what I would like to give you is some tools to help you engage in conversations with the Black community, with your Black friends. These are conversations that should have happened a long time ago. And we need to continue having these conversations. When you sit down and you want to have this conversation, and you should, and I encourage you to have these conversations, we go there to listen to the stories, listen to the experience. And here's a phrase that will help you even get deeper and closer in the conversation. And you can write this down, or we can email it to you. When someone begins to makes a statement about their experience, here's something you could ask them or make a statement back. Tell me more about that. Tell me more about that. I want to hear more about that. Here's something else you could ask a question. How does that make you feel about yourself? How does that make you feel about yourself when a man was yelling at you in front of your nephews on a bus? Or being dragged out of your house and put in prison for a few days until they sorted it out because you were Black? Or being told that don't touch that toy because your hands are dirty? Here's another question you can ask. What can I pray for you? It's a good question. It directs things above. Here's another one. What helps you have courage during this time? And these are just a few questions. There's many more to ask, but these are just a few just to give you an idea. Because you got to lean into what the Black community believes, their belief and their experience. And then underneath that belief, there's emotion, real raw emotion. And this is important to understand, is what is their belief, but yet what is their feeling behind that belief? You know, in spiritual care, we talk about understanding people, and they use an acronym called BENTS, B-E-N-T-S, where it's their belief, their emotions, their nonverbals. A nonverbal is the uncomfortability, moving in their seat, moving their hands, lifting their eyes. It's nonverbal communication. And also the timing. Don't go so fast. It's not a race to get to the answers. It's a race to understand more deeply. And you do that by listening. You know, I'm really grateful for this time to be together in prayer and affliction. I'm going to close out in a prayer, then I'm going to open it up for any kind of comments and feedback that we have, and just take a moment to engage a little bit. So if you would be so kind, just bow with me in a word of prayer, and we'll pray together. God, thank you so much. God, we know our world is deeply flawed and fallen and ugly at times, and sometimes it's beautiful and amazing. We get the whole spectrum. We know that you're good, and you're good all the time. We know people are good, but they're not good all the time. And, you know, humans hurt. Humans can be very hurtful. And God, we just want to lift our eyes up to you tonight. We want to lift up the Black community tonight to you. We want to lift up understanding, lift up empathy, lift up compassion. Lift up our eyes to the oppression. Lift up our eyes to look at our brothers and sisters in the Black community and lean in.